Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. Is a $1 billion verdict really a $1 billion verdict? With me to unpack it all, special guest Sophia Bernard, partner at Taylor Nelson PL. Sophia, welcome to the Hot Seat.
Thank you. I am happy to be here.
So before we heat things up a little bit, Sophia, why don't you just take 20, 30 seconds and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at your firm?
Sure. So I am the litigation partner here at Taylor Nelson. We're a Florida boutique transportation firm, but we service nationwide. We specifically only service the transportation industry because myself and my partners were all very passionate about transportation. And what's really cool about our firm is that each one of us have formerly been general counsel for transportation companies. And so in my practice, I am, defending transportation companies, breach of contracts, cargo claims, doing it all, whatever the company needs. We sometimes serve as their general counsel, so we try to handle all the needs of the industry.
And that you do. So with that, let's heat things up a little bit. So recently, you and I were both on the speaking roster at Freight Fest in Houston, Texas, and you were mesmerizing the folks in the audience as we were talking about nuclear verdicts and the facts and the fiction around some of those things. And so I teased it out here, but and we'll get to that here in a minute. But what are some of the greatest misconceptions about nuclear verdicts that trucking businesses don't fully understand?
Yeah, I think, one of the greatest misconception is really that they're going to be a victim. And I use the word victim because this is all, marketing plays by the plaintiff's bar and plaintiff's attorneys. That I think transportation companies think that just because they're a company, they're automatically going to be hit with a nuclear verdict. And I think to some extent too, their insurance carriers think the same thing. And so what we're seeing sometimes is the overvalue of claims because of the fear that they will be the next billboard, the next newsletter, the next, big topic in transportation.
So you said overvalue of claims. Can you give us
Mhm.
just the economics of what that can look like?
Sure. So, you see a case where the property damages may not be that significant. And one popular, way to do this is alleging traumatic brain injury because that is an illness or an injury that is very hard to prove and often very, very fake. So you see an accident that looks very insignificant. The only significant thing of the accident is that it involved a tractor trailer. And
Mm.
so, plaintiff attorneys will run with it. They will hire, a lot of experts. They'll get their clients treated with unnecessary treatments to try to drive the value of the claim. So where it could have been a claim that's probably worth 50,000, they're, use all the scare tactics to try to make it a 1 million plus claim.
Mm. And typically, how successful are the folks in getting that $1 million claim
They
collected?
really are not that successful. And,
Mm.
the interesting thing is like it's this big topic because all you hear about are, $1 billion verdicts or, $50 million here. But I would say they're very far and few in between. I think the vast majority of claims settle where they're supposed to settle and they settle reasonably. It just really takes having an attorney on your side that's not scared to push back on, reserves, push back on these plaintiffs and try to fight back on these tactics.
So what's the difference? You mentioned that whether or not they have an attorney, but like what is the behavior response of the typical trucking company when someone says, "Hey, we think this is a brain injury and this is a
Mm-hmm.
$1 million plus claim and pay up, or this is going to get even uglier." I
Yeah.
mean, what is the behavior within that organization? Like, what's their typical response, and then what are the first couple of steps that they would typically confront that threat to their operation?
Well, there are a lot of steps, a lot of things, happen before they even get a demand. And so what you see is you see an accident, and then I think some of the first things that happen is it gets reported to the insurance carrier, and the carrier makes an evaluation of the claim, and they put reserves on it, and then the plaintiff's attorney on the back end, they're maybe they're not responding right to the transportation company, their attorney, or the carrier. They're on the back end trying to, get their client to continue treating and trying to, develop a story on their end about what the injuries are. And so it takes a while to get to the point where you start seeing some of the unreasonable demands. But once you get there, you want to push back and really pin down the damages and look at what you have and sort of push back on what those unreasonable demands are.
Interesting. All right, so I teased it, but you told a very eloquent story at Freight Fest about this company that won a billion
Yeah.
dollar verdict, and then you unpacked it and said, "This is not real." Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so there was, and I believe the jurisdiction was Duval County, Jacksonville, Florida, right? So there's a $1 billion verdict, and what you don't know is that the the transportation company that verdict was found against had gone bankrupt well before the trial had happened, and so there was a trial essentially with an empty chair. So the plaintiffs is basically they're making a case to the jury, but there's no one in the chair defending the case. There's no one there. And so the jury has one side of the story and they awarded a $1 billion verdict. Was that ever collectible? Probably not. The company went bankrupt. It probably went nowhere, but it sure made the headlines. And it was enough to scare people into thinking that, they could be the next $1 billion verdict. And, I'm making light of the situation, but, it is something serious because when the verdicts are legitimate, they can sometimes bankrupt companies, but oftentimes there's a lot to the story than just a $50 million $1 billion verdict.
Right, and the way that our worlds intersect, because just the threat that
Mm-hmm.
headline presents, it gets thinking about whether or not they want to be in the industry at all anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Is it too much? And so what's interesting to me is that all business owners, many of which love this industry, and if they think they can still succeed and it's a fair fight, they're gonna be in this industry for a long time to come.
Exactly.
But yeah, but headlines like that certainly make it very challenging to kind of belly up to the bar
Yeah,
and,
and
and,
and
and
I
and
think
keep
some of
going.
the other challenges too is that the insurance companies, they're reacting to this too, right? And so premiums are increasing, the cost to insure for motor carriers are increasing, and so there are a couple of carriers that have
Mm-hmm.
gone out of business for no other reason other than the cost of insurance has gone so high that it forced them out of business. So
Mm-hmm.
that is part of the reaction to nuclear verdicts, and it's why I think that our industry, we really just need to continue pushing back. And I think Florida has taken such a great step in fighting back on the nuclear verdicts by tort reform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be interesting what the story, like if there was just as much press around the real outcome of that billion
Hmm.
dollar verdict, then for me, I think that insurance carriers and their insurance providers may be having different conversations. And so,
Exactly.
um, but the reality is this: I drive down the highway just like you do, and I don't care what major city that I'm in, it's billboard after billboard after billboard of people just itching for a chance to stick it to a trucking company.
Hmm.
Somebody's winning those verdicts. Otherwise, I don't there wouldn't be those billboards there. So clearly, it's a real risk, even if
Hmm.
some of it is marketing. So how do people know in that situation, both in terms of their legal advisors, their insurance companies? How do they know, and what can they do to decipher between what is pure marketing and what is a legitimate expense that they need to do their best to mitigate?
Yeah, so I think it's really hard to know, and there's really no way to know, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think what companies can do is make sure that they have policies in place to protect them. And some of that is making sure that you have a very solid safety program, a very solid training program. You're properly preserving, tractor and trailers after they've been involved in an accident. You're immediately interviewing witnesses. You're immediately getting in front of the case, so that way you're not just kind of sitting back waiting for a plaintiff to build a case, and now you're on the offense the whole time. You start playing defense before it even begins, and sometimes it doesn't even go anywhere. But you stay prepared, and I think that is how we fight back and make sure that we're not overpaying claims
Mm-hmm.
or being a victim of nuclear verdicts but it's really hard to tell, like, when it's all fluff and when it's not. You just have to
Mm.
make sure that your programs are positioned to protect your company and your assets.
Some of the I've seen some headlines where there's settlements even when there's clear evidence that the carrier's not guilty in the case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's sufficient evidence, but they still settle. Um, so help us understand what, from your vantage point, what does fighting back look like?
Fighting back looks like, having, like I said, like just having a solid safety program, really evaluating and digging into those medicals, really looking into the plaintiff's backgrounds, really challenging the legitimacy of their injuries. And if you're a broker, really looking at your liability and making a decision about fighting back. I mean, there's been great case law so far we've seen in the 11th Circuit and I believe the 7th Circuit where they're finding brokers not liable under the FAA preemption. So, if you're a broker, you're in a great position. If you're a motor carrier, we have to focus on the safety program. We have to focus on how we're marketing ourselves. We have to focus on how we're training our drivers. And we have to really watch the habits of our drivers to make sure that we're not providing ammo to the plaintiffs where they can then go back and, use, marketing or even deposition testimony as ammo to sort of, bait the juries with this reptile tactics and make the juries believe that trucking companies are the big bad.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. So let me transition a little bit. You kind of opened up in your intro, sharing a little bit about how each partner within the firm at Taylor Nelson has had general counsel experience, and I'm curious,
Mm-hmm.
how has that informed the way that you serve trucking companies?
So I think, it allows me and all of us really to put ourselves in the position of the client because we were the client at one point. So we understand what clients are looking for and we know how to speak to the client. And we also, when, especially for me as a litigator, when I'm making decisions for a case, I can consider like the business impact of that decision and whether it's worth it in my case or not, because I understand that there's a bigger picture at play. It's not just this case. We have to look at the entire portfolio and make sure that it makes sense and won't impact future cases.
You got that? Oh, that's great. So, what are some of the big issues? Of course, nuclear verdicts, but you're as a legal advisor, not just this. I mean, you're looking at all kinds of different things for your clients as well. What are some other major trucking issues that you're have a close eye on right now?
Definitely cargo claims and fraud and fictitious carriers stealing cargo. I think those are big issues right now.
Yeah, those are not small, not
Yeah.
small at all. Yeah, so let's talk about fraud because I mean, there's big questions around that. Um, what's an example of some things that you're seeing where folks have provided themselves some protection around fraud in their company? What are you seeing from a best practice standpoint? What are your clients doing?
It's really in the vetting of the carrier, just taking like an extra step because these these companies are getting very sophisticated and making themselves look identical to legitimate companies, and
Mm,
it is hard. It's very hard. So I think best practice is just taking an extra step when vetting motor carriers, and also just using other resources like for Carrier 401 or some of the other programs that help determine whether this specific carrier has been involved in some fraudulent activities, which oftentimes that's not even really the answer, right? Because these
hmm
companies, what are they doing? They're dissolving and creating new entities. And so really just taking a look at their financials, because if they don't have strong financials, it's probably a good chance that they're either a newly created entity for the
Mm.
purpose of creating a fraud, or they're just not stable enough and it's probably going to cost you more in the long run.
No, that's great insight right there. Is it not frightening how
It
how
is, it
how
is.
aggressive these people are? This is insane.
Yeah.
So with that, what are you hopeful about within this industry? What do you see within trucking logistics right now that inspires you, that gets you excited about the future of this space?
change. I mean, right now, I just saw a decision in Pennsylvania that, upheld, four quad A preemption. And I'm just very hopeful right now that other courts are going to start applying this and we're going to start seeing some real solid change within the industry. I'm also very hopeful for tort reform. In Florida, our tort reform just passed over the summer. And so right now it's kind of hard to see how much that's going to help the trucking industry, but I'm hopeful that it is going to. So I think within a year or two from now, we'll be able to see that. But I'm very interested to see other states follow the same method, or maybe even make their tort reform a little stronger than ours, because I think it's about time like we start pushing back on plaintiffs and really protect the industry that keeps our country going.
I love that. I love that message right there. So I'm going to mix things up a little bit. Now, my team at Tenney Group, they're obsessed with this Netflix show, The Suits. So, do you know what I'm talking
I
about?
do, I
Do
do, I do.
do you watch this show?
I have watched it.
All right, then let's get real here, Sophia. I got to know, if you're looking in the mirror as yourself as an attorney, do you
Mhm.
see Harvey Specter, Lewis Litt, Mike Ross, or Mike Ross's better half? I forget what her name is. Of those
Um,
four,
I I
of
think
those
I
four.
think I like Harvey. Harvey is my favorite. He's a little unrealistic because he just gets a file and he's like, the answer's right there, and he solves the whole case in 2 minutes. But I really like him. He's one of my favorites. I don't really like Lewis that much. I don't know what it is about Lewis, but I don't like him.
He is he's pretty quirky. That probably
Yes.
might be the most delicate way to say it. No,
Yes.
I was as we were prepping for this conversation, I was wondering. I was like, I bet you anything, Sophia is just going to call straight nonsense when they hand them those files and they open them up they don't even look at. They're like, oh my gosh, the answer's right here. Like
They don't
they don't
even
even.
read it.
No,
I'm like,
no,
how
it's
do
like
you read that fast?
I'm sure that like the work Sophia's done can be summarized in literally
Exactly.
1 second
Exactly.
of opening up a file. Uh, but it's good to know that I've got a Harvey Specter in my network in case I need to call on somebody. That's very good to know. All right, so I've got one final question for you, Sophia, which has been fun. I've really enjoyed this. Um, I want you to go back to young Sophia, freshman year of college, don't know what
Hmm.
the heck you're going to do. And then if you could give any career advice to young Sophia as you're
Hmm.
about to begin thinking about professions and impact and whatever else you want to do, what advice would you give to that young aspiring professional?
I would tell her to keep going. I think when I look back, I don't think there's anything that I would change, but there are definitely moments when I thought that, some of the things that I wanted would just never happen and I felt like quitting. So if I could go back, I would tell myself to rid yourself of those thoughts, keep going because it all works out and it's going to continue getting better and you're completely in charge of your career.
No, I love that. All right, so folks that have questions about litigation, anything in terms of the work that you're doing, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Email Bernard at taylorlawpl.com.
All right, you've heard it here first. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat, Sophia. We will see you next time.